Hello,
Mhm.
everyone. So this is my second interview, and today we are interviewing Mr. Thomas. So could you first introduce yourself, please, to our audience?
Yeah. Hello, I'm Thomas Brewitt. I'm a undergraduate student at MIT. I'm also working with the Canwisher Lab, which is a cognitive neuroscience lab. I'm specifically studying the role of audition in our understanding of physics in a region of the brain known as the physics network.
Hmm. So you mentioned that you study neuroscience in MIT and the physics aspect of it, right? So what first made you curious about neuroscience, and when did you realize that you wanted to pursue it seriously?
I mean, my journey to neuroscience kind of was a transition from an interest in AI and robotics. I started off inspired by, the sci-fi robots like Lieutenant Commander Data, that sort of thing. And in high school, thought I wanted to develop artificial intelligence to kind of replicate that. But as I kept on learning, I eventually took a class at the Harvard Extension School that was kind of comparing AI and neuroscience with each other. And from that class, I kind of discovered that we really don't know all that much about consciousness. And if we want to make robots that are more like conscious beings, like what you see in the TV, uh, we really need to understand the brain more and how our brain works before we go and copy it. So that's how I started getting into neuroscience. Once I got to MIT, messaged Canwisher, since she was one of the people who taught that course or one of the lecturers teaching that course. And from then on, I just got my feet wet in the neuroscience field and enjoyed it from there and have kept on doing it.
Mm. Yeah, so you mentioned sci-fi movies like Star Wars, right? And robotics. So was that when that changed the way that you thought about the brain?
I mean, it was really the class at the Harvard Extension School that got me into thinking about the brain, and that definitely did enlighten me as to the importance of understanding it further. I think there have been a few other classes at MIT. Nancy Kingwisher actually has her own class. That one was a big overview of the brain, different regions, and in it we compared. In it, there was a brief unit where we compared how neural networks can actually be used to understand the brain more, and I thought that was a really interesting comparison that did change how I thought about the brain. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so you keep on mentioning Nancy Canwisher. Am I saying it right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
she's your scientific advisor, right? For the audience to know.
Yes. Yeah. I'm working at her in lab, so she's my PI, principal investigator. So she's the boss.
So you said consciousness is a question they keep on thinking about the brain, right?
hmm hmm
So is that the question about the brain that you think about the most, or is there any other question?
I mean, I'm definitely the most interested in consciousness. I think if you ask anyone in neuroscience, that's probably what they're going to be most interested in. The issue is that with the current tools, it's extremely hard to actually study consciousness as a phenomenon in and of itself. So we have to study other parts of the brain, and maybe one day we'll figure out something that points us in the direction of explaining consciousness or something. But yeah, that's definitely what I'm most interested in, if not actually working on.
So do you think other scientists also that know little about this topic would also want to explore consciousness?
I mean, consciousness is just an interesting idea. I mean, why are we aware of things, anything like that? I mean, I'm sure that not everyone is interested in it, but I think it's a fundamentally interesting question. I'm sure a lot of people would want to look more into it.
Hmm. Yeah. So how does an interesting question, like a research question, become something that's um a real neuroscience experiment?
To take a question into an actual experiment, you need to come up with a plan on how you're actually going to measure what it is you're looking for, really. This is the problem with consciousness. You can't really measure it at all. But in the work I do, which is on the physics network, you can measure people's like neural activity through fMRI. fMRI allows you to measure the amount of blood that's being requisitioned by different parts of the brain, and you can use that as an analog to see how active different regions are. And in my work, we present people like physical stimuli versus non-physical, usually social stimuli, and we compare the activity in different regions when people are thinking about these two different things. And then by comparing and seeing where physics is the um, preferred stimuli and where social stuff is the preferred stimuli, we can answer some questions about how physics is processed. And then different subsets like auditory or visual, we can also compare between to get more details about its operations.
Hmm. Yeah, so like you mentioned like fMRIs, right? And
Hmm.
like I know that you designed an fMRI experiment, but like our
Hmm.
like audience doesn't. So could you like elaborate on the fMRI experiment that you did while being an undergraduate at MIT?
Yeah. The experiment I did was on the contribution that auditory sensation has to our understanding of physics. So if you think about, you know, two blocks falling off a table, you can imagine what that would sound like, and you could get some sort of information about what happened just by hearing it. Of course, you can also get information by just watching the blocks fall off the table. There's been a lot of studies done on how people process physical interactions by watching them, but not really by listening to them. So, in my experiment, I compared the activity of people's brains while they were watching physical stimuli to listening to physical stimuli, as well as social for control. And what we found is surprisingly, most of the previously identified physics network, which is the region that is responsible for the visual physical processing, surprisingly, that did not have too much of a response to the auditory physical conditions, which, given that we can make physical judgments based off of sound, would indicate to us that there's some other region in the brain that is responsible for the auditory physical processing. And what I'm doing right now is actually looking through all of the activity throughout the entire brain of all of our subjects and trying to find a region that is commonly activated for the physical processing during auditory, physical stimuli as opposed to visual. And then hopefully by combining all of that data, I can find the region that is actually responsible for the auditory physical processing.
Mm, yeah. So like how did you come
Mhm.
up with that research question and what guidance would you give for like students who are like trying to pick a research question?
I mean, I came up ultimately this research question kind of evolved off of assignment. I started at the lab, and because I was an undergraduate, I was just put on to a little project that some other member at the lab was doing. This was on comparing, you know, the activity of stuff versus things in this physics network, where stuff is like fluids, things that you can't really count, and then things are more quantifiable, like blocks or cups or something like that. And during this study, I also included some stimuli that were both auditory and visual. And what we saw there is that we got a higher response for the audio-visual conditions than we did for just vision by itself, but there was no response for audio by itself. So that prompted me to go and look more into the role that audition played, and here I am now studying it. And as for how to actually come up with a research question, I think if you already have some experience, like if you were assigned to some project, I would say build off of that, keep working on it, and that will you'll eventually find something unexpected that you can look into and use as your question. But if you just want to get started, you don't have any mentors or something or a project to jump on board with, I think it's a good place to look. You would need to read some literature on what's actually being studied, and you would then need to identify what isn't being studied and ask that. Now, this is going to take a lot of time, so it's easier if you jump on in and find someone willing to sponsor you through an experiment and then go off of that. But there are definitely a lot of, if you have the passion and you have the interest to read through what's being done, you can probably come up with something that you're not seeing be answered and work on it.
Yeah. So like, do you think neuroscience could eventually help us like understand why people develop strong interests or like passions towards a certain subject?
I mean, neuroscience and at least fMRI, which is what I'm familiar with. In fMRI, if you're more interested in a stimuli, you'll generally see more response throughout the entirety of the brain. So, but this can be confounded with many things, like if it's a new stimulus or if it's particularly exciting as opposed to being interesting to you. All of these will lead to a higher overall response throughout the brain. So I think it would be difficult to pinpoint exactly why certain interests arise uh, from fMRI by itself. There are probably some studies you could do that would separate out these different confounding factors, and so it's possible. I think if you go from simply, if instead of simply presenting stimuli, you have people perform different tasks related to the different topics, you might be able to just determine interest or something like that. But being able to predict what interests will develop in the future, I cannot think of any studies that have indicated that we could do that yet. But, you know, maybe it's something to look for in the future. I don't know.
Yeah. So like now moving on to like advice for like future students going into like university and college and etc. So like what sort of extracurriculars did you do like in school and like where did you go to school? Yeah.
I mean, I had pretty much only three main extracurriculars. The one I spent the least time with was the orchestra, so I just played the violin in high school. Um, the most important one, I think, and the one I spent the mediumest amount of time doing, was taking classes at the Harvard Extension School. I went to high school in Cambridge, so I was able to take classes during my high school career at Harvard by paying a fee. Um, and in those classes, I mostly took computer science, AI, and then the final, like AI neuroscience course because there was interest in that. And I think in total, I took four classes, so that's about a full semester of college in high school. I think that was probably the main attractor for MIT in that. And while most people don't go to high school in Cambridge and so won't have as easy access to Harvard Extension School, I think in general, just taking classes at your local college, like local community college or whatever colleges offer extension courses, would be an excellent thing to do if you want to get into a higher up school. And then another extracurricular I did, and this took more time than anything, was the first robotics competition. This, you know, I think this also helped a lot with MIT specifically since it's engineering, building a robot, and MIT likes that kind of stuff. I was the captain of my high school's first robotics team, and we went to competitions. We were very underfunded, so we were putting stuff together with like whatever we could find in the back and never performed super well in competitions. But we did manage to beat some, much more well-funded robots at the very least. And I think having the experience of trying to scrounge up things and work with what you've got was also pretty valuable. And I wrote about it in my application to MIT, so I think seeing that experience was also helpful. I think one thing that was very important to me was to actually do things that I enjoyed rather than doing things just to get into a good college. And I think there you can definitely do things you enjoy that also get you into a good college. But I think admissions officers can tell if you actually have the passion for it or if you are simply doing it because you want to get into a good school. And I think they do prefer the people who are passionate about what they're doing. So I think take extracurriculars that you're actually passionate about and put a lot of time into them and show your commitment is probably the best thing you can do regardless of where you are.
Mhm. Yeah. So, like in high school, wait, which high school did you go to?
Cambridge Rindge and Latin, it's the public high school
Mm-hmm.
here at Cambridge. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, mm, like, was it hard in high school? Like exams, tests, assignments, and etc.
I mean, for me, high school was not particularly difficult. I mean, I'm at MIT, so I might also be comparing current work to previous work, which makes it look extra not difficult. Um, there were, of course, a lot of tests and whatnot. I took a lot of AP classes in high school, some of them easier, some of them harder. I didn't actually take AP physics, which is surprising. Everyone else who got into MIT from my school took AP physics, but I never got around to it for some reason. But yeah, I took most of the other computer science or AP classes there. There's also some classes on AI that I took, and then Cambridge Orange and Latin had this program called RISTA, the Orange School of Technical Arts, where I could take a lot of classes in engineering, more computer science, and biotech and that sort of thing. But ultimately, high school was not too difficult compared to college.
Yeah, yeah. So uh, except for like neuroscience and like physics and
Mhm.
neuroscience, what other major would have took, or like what sort of like minor are you doing?
I'm currently minoring in political science. I'm particularly interested just because of I don't know. I just find history interesting, particularly the history of like international relations. And so I wanted MIT requires you take a set of humanities courses instead of just going full in on the sciences. And I really enjoy the history of international relations, and I really enjoy international relations in the current day, so I decided to also minor in political science just so I could, take some fun classes where I get to read about stuff that I'm interested in and then write a few paragraphs in a paper on it because it's fun. So if I didn't have neuroscience, I don't think I would major in political science, but I would probably do more with it.
Yeah. So like for our last question, what is
Mhm.
like one word or like advice that you would give to like the audience and like people who are going into like college and stuff like that?
I mean, I think I already said something along these lines, but just do stuff that you're actually passionate about. Uh, if you're passionate about something, you'll spend more time with it. You'll actually enjoy what you're doing, and you'll probably get more out of the experience because you are actually invested in it, as opposed to doing it to check off something on your transcript or anything like that. Passion is very important for anything, so do do whatever you can that keeps it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So that concludes our interview session. Thank you so much, Thomas. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you're
goodbye,
welcome. It was
guys.
fun. Thank you.